So, welcome to this week's edition of Level Up Live. Today, West is off teaching people about AI, and I am here from the Virgin Islands. We've got a fascinating guest coming up. I'll introduce him in just a second, but the first question we always have for you is, where are you watching from? Today, I am in the Dominican Republic, sitting in an all-inclusive, looking at a pool, and about the time the show ends, I will take my luggage and head for the airport. But it's been an interesting couple of weeks here in the Dominican Republic. So let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And speaking of comments, if you have any questions for our guests, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll try to get them answered for you. Today I have with me Michael Lennox. He is an author and a scholar. And tell us a little more about what you do.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Yes, I'm a professor at the University of Virginia's Darden School of Business. I've been teaching MBAs and business executives about business strategy and related topics for about 20 plus years now. And I have a new book out called Strategy in the Digital Age, Mastering Digital Transformation. That's actually based on a course that I've been offering called Strategy in the Digital Age the past 5 or 6 years, and decided to turn that into a business book for managers to help them with digital transformation.
Okay, so tell us a little more about your book. I'm going to ask some specific questions in a minute, but tell us a little more about the book.
Yeah, again, teaching the course, working with my students, bringing in readings from others, but really wanting to put my own personal stamp on this topic. And, my particular kind of viewpoint is kind of in the title, which is not only thinking about digital transformation, but specifically thinking about strategy. And at the end of the day, I'm a big believer that when you look at what digital technologies are doing to any number of sectors, it's changing the fundamental basis of competition. And so understanding how it affects your business strategy, I think is absolutely critical. And so this book is an effort to provide a set of frameworks and worksheets to help you kind of work through how you might position yourself and how you might pursue a digital transformation.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. And in fact, it's interesting that Wes and I talk a lot with individuals we interview, but Wes and I both talk a lot about it in general because it is we believe it has the power to fundamentally change so many things. So let me ask you this question then: how is this digital transformation impacting the nature of competition? Because you mentioned that
Yeah.
Well, I see it impacting business, but what about the competition aspect?
Yeah, I think in a number of ways. One way, obviously, it can change the way you engage with your customers and the way you create value for them. We talk about the idea that you might have more long-lasting and continuous relationships with your customers, where you're constantly getting data and using that to provide value-added services back to them. It's allowing for a proliferation of business models. You can think about advertising models that have been pushed by the likes of Google and Facebook. You see platform models where companies like an Uber and Airbnb, or even Amazon with Marketplace or Apple with their App Store, are creating places for exchange where they take a little bit of a transaction fee. Software as a service, so moving away from kind of a pay for a product model to a more subscription-based model. All of these are possible and proliferating in the digital age. A couple other things. We're seeing what we call the deconstruction of the value chain, where what might historically have been a very well integrated value chain is being picked apart maybe by digital native companies that are coming in and trying to take just a little piece of the puzzle. We see quite a bit of that in, for example, financial services with the fintech sector. We see this in telecommunications. We see this in entertainment and the like. And then the last one I would mention is this kind of ubiquity of platforms and what do they mean for underlying competition. And so using an economist term, we talk about network externalities, this idea that the value of a good or service is improving and increasing as more people consume it. This becomes really important because it's creating some competitive dynamics where we might see what we call winner-take-all markets, where there might be just one dominant player, like a Google in search or a Facebook, at least historically in social media. So all of these things are kind of taking place, and how you then position your company in these evolving marketplaces is kind of the heart of the book.
Yeah, it was interesting because we were talking recently with a gentleman about the fact that the way people buy is changing, and part of that is associated with the availability of information. You
Yeah.
know, I saw a statistic that said that now, when in the copier space, or the office equipment space, that when a buyer reaches out and talks to a salesperson, they probably somewhere between 60 and 80% of the way through the buying decision has already been completed before they ever see a salesman.
Yeah.
That's very different, because in the past it used to be that it started when the sales guy walked in cold calling. So
That's right. Consumers are empowered. There's a lot more data available to them, a lot of more information available to them. But again, I think there's also this data that's being created in these exchanges that can be used, maybe using AI and the like. So I talk in the book as one example is the music industry. Think how that's evolved over the last 30 plus years. We moved from an analog era, quickly to a digital era with CDs and the like. But then the rise of the internet allowed for us to exchange files, first kind of illegally through Napster, but eventually with Apple and the download era. But that was actually very short-lived, because what quickly started to happen is, as we started to exchange files and use files online, we had all this wonderful information about who you're listening to, what type of music your friends listen to. And so you look at a Spotify, very data AI enabled, that provides those wonderful curated playlists that you get to listen to. So again, it just changes the nature by which you're engaging your customers, because now you're able to create these interactive, customized solutions to them in ways you just weren't able to before.
yeah, and I love that, the fact that you can really, if you're using it effectively, you can learn a lot about your customers from what they're doing and using some of the external sources. And you can find people that might be your customers. They just from, by effectively figuring out what you want a customer to look like, and then creating that target. I do a little bit of that on Facebook, for my other businesses, trying to find, okay, who are the people that I'm trying to reach, and then how do I target them, either in a specific area or maybe just globally. I target them to build my brand and those kinds of things. So I think that's an interesting example of being able to, Facebook and Google and all these people know so much about all these customers. Now it's just about figuring out how to leverage what they know.
And it's not just in the domains that we might, generally consider digital. You look at just even the sales of products, like even industrial products in a B2B market, they're increasingly being imbued with intelligence that allows them to connect data back maybe to the original seller. This kind of the Internet of Things, as we refer to it. So you take a company like GE, who was pushing this vision a few years back of a digital Internet of Things, where all their machines are generating data about their performance, gets fed back, and can be used to maybe highlight when they think a machine is going to break or need to have replacement parts, or ways to create efficiency. You mentioned copier machines, the same thing. You're generating volumes of data that can then be pulled together across millions of copier machines to help improve the functioning and the reliability of them.
Yeah, I know. I agree 100%. So let's take that a little farther then. So as we see these technologies emerge, how are they affecting the business landscape that we're in?
Yeah, we live in an era where it seems like every month, maybe, there's a new hot technology. A year ago, people were talking about the metaverse, and 2 years ago, they were talking about crypto, and now it's all about generative AI. I think that's just a feature of the world we live in today. I think what's really important is to recognize that this will continue. And so one of the things I talk about in the book is the exponential growth in three core technologies. One is processing power, what's called Moore's Law. We've seen this incredible doubling of processing power roughly every 18 months for nearly 50 years now. Similarly, we've seen exponential growth in broadband and ability to exchange data over networks. And then third, we've seen this increase in storage capacity, probably best represented by cloud computing today. These three technologies kind of underride a lot of the digital transformation we see today, that ability to collect a lot of data, process it, create value-added solutions on top of that. What's interesting is, if these trends continue, I would argue for even another 5-10 years with exponential growth, the world will be radically different in a decade from now than what it is today, in ways that are really hard for us to predict. And I make no effort to say I'm a technology futurist that can tell you where the world is going. I just highlight that you need to be nimble and be a constantly learning organization to deal with this constantly evolving technology. Just take generative AI. Maybe more like 9, 10 months ago, people really weren't talking much about it. There were some interesting things happening, but then we had the release of ChatGPT 3.5. And then suddenly it was arguably the fastest diffusing technology, digital technology in history, reaching 100 million users within a few months. And it is now, on top of every executive and every business leader's mind. That is the world we live in. And I don't think it's going to relent anytime soon.
Yeah, I would agree with you. In fact, it seems like the rate of change is accelerating. It's one thing after another after another. I like
Yeah,
your use of the word exponential.
I believe that's true, though. I always like to point out that this idea that technology is evolving quickly and things are more chaotic than ever before seems to be true every year going back in history, right? Like even if you go to like the 1910s, this new thing, the automobile is out here in industrial production and mass production, and the world's changing too fast. But there is some evidence that things are accelerating. One of the things you can look at is turnover in the top, let's say the S&P 500. There seems to be more and more turnover amongst leading organizations than there was historically, which just suggests that success is more temporary, and that markets are moving quicker in many ways than they used to.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing because there is so much turnover for companies that want to stay dominant in their marketplace and continue to grow and increase market share. They're the companies that are going to be the one the most about the future. But if you're, I don't want to say this, if you're bird hunting, and you can't shoot it where the bird is,
Right.
you have to shoot it where the bird is going to be. And if you're not thinking about that in your business, where are we going to be 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road? Then the odds are that you're not going to be ready for it, which is really very critical.
Yeah, I talk in the book about this concept we've been using with our MBAs for decades about the strategist challenge. And the strategist challenge, very simply, is identifying valuable competitive positions that are at the intersection of, first of all, your values, very important, your North Star, your mission, what you're trying to accomplish, the opportunities the market provides, including competition, and then ultimately your capabilities that you have as an organization. And what makes it a challenge is this is dynamic. And so what's happening in a digital age is that opportunity set is constantly shifting and moving. And it's often moving in ways that might render your old capabilities not as valuable as they once were. And so the challenge, I think, for a lot of companies is I have yet to see a company just wholesale reject the old capabilities they had and start afresh and new, and that being a successful world. You have to evolve your capabilities, And so how do you build off of the success you had in the past to continue to thrive in the future, to, as you said, kind of meet the world where it's going? That's why it's a challenge. And again, that's largely what the book is trying to do, is provide you a set of frameworks and worksheets to kind of help you think through that strategist challenge.
Okay, so then for a business that really wants to be successful and execute a change, what are some of the steps that you suggest they take?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would highlight is what I call the digital transformation stack. And there's 4 layers to that stack that I think any company needs to be thinking of. First and foremost, at the very base of the stack, you have your digital infrastructure. And unfortunately, this is maybe where most companies start and maybe finish their thinking about digital transformation. But this is everything from, should we be using cloud services? Should we be building a data lake? How do we organize our information, bring it together? Things like Internet of Things, where do we put sensors and the like, and maybe our equipment? The next level up is what I would call data and analytics. Now that we've collected all this data, what do we do with it? And this can be everything from sophisticated AI to even just basic things like dashboards that we create that allow people to make better and more informed decisions. Layered on top of that is what I would call digital applications. And this is really where the rubber hits the road. This is where companies are creating specific digital applications, maybe for their customers, maybe internally, maybe it's something from HR or finance. But these are the artifacts that really facilitate and help decision-making and actions. And then at the very top of that stack, most importantly, is your digital strategy. And perhaps not surprisingly, as a strategist, I feel like this is the most critical, that if you don't understand where you're trying to go, there'll be a lot of wasted effort. As I like to say, digital transformation sometimes for companies as if you were improving the efficiency of the engines on the Titanic. At the end of the day, you're still going to hit the iceberg. Maybe you'll hit it a little quicker or more efficiently, but you're still going to hit the iceberg. Having a good digital strategy about where you direct the ship is absolutely critical to inform those efforts that you make. And again, I've seen so many companies waste money developing digital applications that really didn't help their competitive position at the end of the day. So you've got to have some direction to where you're trying to head as an organization to inform those efforts.
Much with that, because I think that's where most businesses fail. They look at, what did we do last year? Well, what more can we squeeze out of the market this year?
Yeah.
And that's as far as they're looking, and it becomes a challenge for them. You said, so what are some of the tools that you provided in the book? Because I know beforehand you mentioned a couple of things.
Yeah, again, each chapter has a different set of frameworks that I provide to help guide through. Some of those are really basic strategy tools, like what are happening in trends in the industry, who are your competitors, both current but also potential. Make heavy use of the industry life cycle. So when we have these new technologies, we see a fairly common set of patterns of how those technologies improve and what happens from a competitive standpoint. So understanding where you are in the evolution of the technology, understanding where you are in the evolution of your company, because very different, not surprisingly, between a mature incumbent company competing in this market versus a new entrepreneurial entrant. They have different opportunities, different capabilities they bring to the table. Then some of it is about understanding the underlying kind of economic structure that's likely to emerge. So again, I mentioned network externalities and platforms, and really thinking about what competitive positions might exist. And then once you have identified kind of where you're trying to go, that's where, again, we bring in the digital transformation stack and think about the managerial aspects of this. And so I talk quite a bit in the book, and I've seen so many examples of companies that, if you approach digital transformation wholly or exclusively as the domain of your technology shop, maybe your CTO and the like, you're probably not going to succeed. You really need that C-level suite, the CEO buy-in, and you need to be very intentional about how various business units within the organization are going to embrace and use digital. And I think that's where more often than not companies fail, is that they might create these wonderful widgets and the like pieces of technology, but then do the actual users use them? And that's both internally and externally. And so I talk about the need for digital champions, people who are not necessarily, data scientists or technology specialists, but people who can translate what the technology can do for you into the specific areas that they have expertise. So take generative AI. There's so much work going on right now to highlight, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me about that. So many technologies out there and efforts to kind of say, oh, we're using generative AI. But the question is, why and to what ends? And dare I say, we're in the part of the hype cycle, I think, right now, where there's a lot being said, but I'm not sure people have fully understood or embraced what the technology could or could not, do for them.
Yeah, and like I said, that's one of the things that West and I love to talk about is ways to use it. I think part of it is understanding what might our customers, how might their business change, and what opportunities does that open up for us? Because not only are our companies going to have to undergo a digital transformation, but our clients are going to have to undergo a digital transformation. So how do we position our company to be able to be a trusted advisor and get a little bit of income from that process?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. And I think thinking through those downstream implications for the technology, for those partners you have, I think is absolutely critical here, because it could, again, radically change the way those relationships occur. I'll give you one example that I talk about. Car dealerships, right? In the current world, car dealerships, viable business, make money off of selling and servicing vehicles. if we move to a full autonomous vehicle marketplace, those might likely go away. Even the whole consumption model of automobiles might change, where we no longer purchase automobiles, but we just use ride-hailing services. Think of Uber on steroids here. That fundamentally changes that that business as well. And you can imagine it has upstream and downstream implications for a whole bunch of other businesses. Do we need parking garages anymore when we have autonomous vehicles? So thinking through those systemic changes is a large part of that strategy, work that you're doing.
Well, and what you said just it triggered something in my mind, and you have to excuse my ADHD kicking in here. But I saw an article recently where the states are now thinking about charging vehicles instead of the gasoline tax like they do right now, because as electric vehicles proliferate, their revenue from the gasoline tax is going down, is changing from a gas tax to a mileage-based revenue system, because elsewise, pretty soon there's not going to be there's not going to be enough revenue to keep the roads maintained. And again, It's just one of those little pieces of how things change, and it affects so much.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, my internet is fading in and out here. I'm hoping the broadcast is going okay. I don't know if you're seeing it, but every once in a while my screen goes back. I do appreciate you being with us. Do me a favor. If people want to contact you, what should they use?
Well, first and foremost, the book is coming out from Stanford University Press, but it's available on all your favorite online retailers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and the like. But if you want to learn a little bit more about me and my work, I suggest you go to my private website, which is michaellennox.com. Lennox is spelled Lenox.com. And then you can see more about some of my work, my writing, other books I've published. And I also have a podcast myself called Good Disruption, which talks about different technologies and whether we think they're going to be disruptive or not at the end of the day. So I strongly recommend you go check that out and stay connected.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We loved having you. And maybe next book out, we'll have you again.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Okay. You have a nice day.
You too.
Okay, we're clear.
Great.